All right, welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, the 4th of March, 2026, and this is the Cluster API office hours. Cluster API is a sub-project of Kubernetes SIGs, and as such, we follow their meeting guidelines, which can be summarized as please treat everyone as you would expect to be treated, or in other words, be excellent to each other. And if you'd like to talk, please raise your hand and I will call on you. All right, so at the beginning of our meetings, we'd like to take some time to welcome new attendees. So if you're a new attendee and would like to say hello to the community or introduce yourself, I will be quiet for a few seconds. Please feel free to unmute and say hi. Okay, I'm guessing everyone here has said hi. Who wants to say hi? So we'll go on to the open proposal readouts. Is there anyone here who would like to talk about either the independent worker topology or the external CA and cert sign?
Yeah, some pre-work in progress for the worker topology. And yeah, just ping me if anyone's interested in joining our working group call.
Awesome. Thank you, Igor. All right. We will move on then to our regular discussion topics. So Fabrizio, you've got the first on a follow-up discussion about V1 Beta 2 transition for providers. So take it away.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. So, a couple of weeks ago, we had a discussion about V1 Beta 1 removal and removal of the compatibility of the V1 Beta 1 contract. And more specifically, a few folks from the provider were bringing up that, yeah, it takes time and work. And so we were discussing about the idea of postponing the deadline, August deadline for these two actions. There was no objections. I looked into it and I decided instead of postponing by one, we postponed by two. So we give a little bit more room. And so the new deadline is that in April 2027, we will stop serving V1 Beta 1 API and drop compatibility with the V1 Beta 2 contract. And I opened the PR, I updated the cluster API book, all the documents, proposal, etc., etc. So we should be good. I reached out to Nolan, which was the person that brought this up, and is more than happy with what we propose. So that's it.
Yeah, great to hear. Does anybody have questions or comments about this? I hate to say it, but I know April 2027 is going to be on us in no time. You know?
Yeah, the fun fact is that if you we have an issue where we are tracking when this is when we will stop serving, and then we have to keep it around for a few couple of release more because due to some API server bug in conversion and to support jump upgrade, etc., etc. So it will, at the end of the story, we are I think that we are already over 3 years to get rid of an API.
Wow. All right. Well, good to hear. And yeah, like if anybody has questions or comments, please look at the. I guess that this is already merged, so there's not much to do here. But if people have comments, they can come ask questions in the Slack channel.
Just if you click in the issue, there is linked, and there is the link, and this one is where we are tracking the plan. And yeah, it will finish it. And you see, we started in December. We started in August 2025. We finish in December 2027.
Okay.
Maybe at the earliest.
Maybe.
All right. If nobody has questions, then we will move along to the next topic. Okay. So cluster autoscaler and on initialization taints. Stefan and I have been having a rousing back and forth conversation on this PR from Liang Quang to bring in the taint propagation into a cluster autoscaler. And the reason this is being brought in is to make our scale from zero more automatic for people. So it's going to look at the cluster API records, it's going to pull the taints out, and it's going to show those taints to the internal simulation logic of the autoscaler so that it can figure things out. But we are having a back and forth discussion about on initialization taints, which are taints that, I guess in the context of this conversation, taints that are used to indicate that there might be a piece of hardware or something or a device driver that's being initialized, and that taint will only be there until such time as the initialization has happened, and then the taint will be removed by something. In the cluster autoscaler world, these are sometimes called startup taints, or there's a flag to control them called startup taints. And so what we're kind of going back and forth on is should the cluster autoscaler or should the cluster API implementation for the autoscaler, should it ignore the on initialization taints and not pass them through to the simulator, meaning that the user won't have to tell the autoscaler what the startup taints are. The autoscaler will just, it will never know that those taints would be there because the cluster API provider will basically clean them before it creates a template node. And I think after thinking about this for a while, like the only technical problem I can see with that at the moment is that we might get into a scenario, and I try to describe some of it in here. We can get into a scenario then where the cluster autoscaler thinks a pod will schedule to a node, and so it makes that node, and it doesn't know there's going to be a startup taint on that node. The node gets created with the startup taint, and there's now some amount of time until that taint is cleared that this pod is still pending. And in that scenario, if the cluster autoscaler still sees the pod pending and it's not being scheduled to this node, it will make another node. And so what will end up happening is you'll keep making nodes until the first initialization taint is cleared, at which point the pod will schedule, and then the cluster autoscaler will stop, seeing it as pending and making nodes for it. And I think this is probably one of the areas that would be a problem with this. So what, kind of the position that I have here is that, like, I think we should portray the initialization taints, but we also have to tell cluster API users that if they're using those, they should use the startup taints option on the cluster autoscaler so that the autoscaler doesn't make too many nodes. Please, Stefan, and hopefully I explained that well enough.
Yeah, the problem is mostly, I think, on my side, understanding autoscaler stuff. One question, the startup taints thingy, do you remember on which granularity you can configure the taints there? Is it like taint key? Is it taint key and value?
Yeah, there is startup taints, just allows you to specify them per taint. So you have to have the key, you have to have the value, you have to have the effect, right?
So all of it, yeah. Okay.
Right. And I realize that's going to be way too verbose, probably for most users. But there is a pull request that may have merged already that it is making this so you can specify just the prefix on a startup taint, and then any startup taint that contains that prefix would be able to be ignored. Yeah. No,
Okay.
Here we go.
Yeah. I'm more asking because of the other way around. I was more thinking like, how precisely can you point to this taint?
Oh yeah,
but it sounds like we can do whatever we want, right? Either very
Right.
coarse grained or very specific. It's up to okay. But it can only be done globally for the autoscaler, right? So basically, if you say like, oh, this is a startup taint, then this is a startup taint for, depending on your deployment topology, at least for an entire cluster.
Right, for the whole,
not on a
right.
node group level or something.
I'll make a note. I probably should investigate this. There is a per node group functionality, and there might be an option to have per node group startup taints, which would be like, in our case, that would probably be like an annotation or something we'd have to add, and then the autoscaler could say, okay, this node group has these startup taints. That may or may not exist.
Yep.
But that's something we could add if people need that.
Yeah. But I think like for just to understand like what is happening, let's say during mainstream use cases. So if I say basically this thing is a startup taint, then what happens is just that if this taint shows up it is treated like a startup taint. But it's not a problem if that taint doesn't exist for a certain node group or something.
Right.
Then it just
What-
doesn't have any. And I mean, I think the usual thing is that if you have a taint that's specifically meant to be used for the startup use case and then goes away, then that taint is likely the same for your entire cluster. It's probably always like a startup taint
Right.
and never like an always taint.
Right. Totally.
So probably we're totally fine with that. It just has that a bit of an annoying effect that basically you have to make sure that whatever you put on machine spec taints has to be basically aligned to what you put as a command line arc on the autoscaler.
Right. If you're using it as like an initialization taint like that, like a gating kind of taint.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
only for those. Yeah.
right, because the startup taints flag, what that tells the cluster autoscaler is that if it sees a node that it just made to satisfy a workload, and that node has the startup taint on it, it won't make another node until the startup taint is gone. It will give the time for the startup taint to disappear. And I think it will also ignore the startup taint during the scheduling. I need to look at the scheduling simulation.
Yeah, that would have been also my guess, that basically it knows, okay, hey, this node is still coming up. And whenever it computes, like, I don't know how many pods are waiting, how many nodes are coming up, it basically assumes that this taint will go away at some point. So for that computation, it doesn't just create another node, as you're saying.
Right. And I think when it sets up the simulation, though, it looks at the nodes that are going into the simulator, and it says, if I see a startup taint on one of these nodes, I'm going to scrub the startup taint so that the simulator doesn't know the startup taint is there. So I get an accurate understanding of what node I could create.
Makes sense. And if I understand it correctly, there is basically no way for like the code that does the auto discovery within the copy provider to like add additional startup taints specifically for a node group because it discovered them or something. That's just not possible, probably because like a different part of the code base or something.
I need to look into that. It might actually be possible.
But I think we have two problems, right? One is like, can we even do that? And then the other thing is it a safe assumption that every taint that is specified with initialization is actually going away afterwards? Which is something that I sort of assumed because I sort of think that's like the mainstream use case.
Right.
But if it's not like a 100% like safe thing to assume, then we should not assume it. Absolutely.
Right. Like if we have a contract somewhere that says on initialization taints must be removed after some time period or whatever, or that's the intention, then I would agree with you. We could probably ignore them. But on the, I just know like someone out there is probably using it in a different way, and then their stuff would be broken, right?
Yep. Okay. And if I got it also correctly, what you're saying is that the way that this auto discovery from machine spec taints code path is being hit, it basically treats on initialization and always taints the same way as only that one kind of taint that you can specify via annotation, right?
Right. So this particular section of code is happening when there's a scale from 0 for the node group, right? So there are no nodes that it can use as an example, and it's asking what would a node look like for this node group? And then we're reporting back, this is what the node would look like. These are the taints it would have, and that's where we're pulling the taints. So like, yes, we could erase the on initialization taints and present that to the core of the cluster autoscaler, but then that's going to be inaccurate, right? And it could cause disruptions in the scheduling simulation. So this,
in the cases, but basically just in the cases where an on initialization taint is not actually going away or something like that, right?
Or also in cases where the on initialization taint stays long enough to cause the autoscaler
to trigger a timeout or something, right?
Right. Because like we saw this with GPUs where it would start to make a GPU, and then because it didn't understand that the driver would take time to activate the GPU, it kept making more GPU instances. And it will do that pathologically based on how long it takes for the taint to clear, which, in most cases shouldn't be that expensive. But if you're getting expensive machines, even 10 or 15 minutes could be a lot of money.
Okay, good. Then thanks for all that context. I think then I agree with you.
Okay. I'm going to do a little bit more research to follow up.
I mean, I agree as far as we know, right? But everything you're saying sounds plausible to me. And I think it could be also like, even if you're only 99% sure, I think this is definitely like a good first iteration of this. And if you realize, I mean, do the research, all good, right? But basically, if you say, okay, based on what we know, based on that research, let's go with that. And then if you figure out over time that there are like an additional rare edge cases where we have to refine that behavior later, then we can still make it even more fancy.
Yeah, we can always improve it, right? At the very least, this might make the user experience a little more verbose because users will have to use startup taints. But you're right. If we learn later that we could do per node group startup taints, then when the node group is discovered and we see on initialization taints in it, we could register those as startup taints if that's what we want to do from the cluster API side, right?
Exactly. Yep. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, cool. Yeah, no, thank you. I really appreciate the discussion here.
Yeah, I just got a random ping on the PR. That's why.
Nice. Does anybody else have questions or comments about that before we move on? Okay. Then we will go into the provider updates. First over to Joe with CAP OCI.
Hey, so yeah, we released, oh, I missed the dot there. Released 0.23.0 today. Thank you. And that supports CAPI 111. So still dealing with the V1 beta 1 stuff in a deprecation mode, but yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, great to hear.
You all made it super easy. Thank you.
We always love to hear that. All right, next up we got Matt with a CAP Z update.
Yeah, and this is kind of self-explanatory, but just to update people, we finally got CAPI 112 integrated, and we have a minor release next week where that will show up in CAP Z.
Awesome, great to hear, and yeah, way to stay on the cutting edge of cluster API here.
We try.
All righty. That brings us to the end of our regular agenda here. So unless folks have ad hoc topics, looks like we might take about 40 minutes of our day back. I do see a hand raised. Who is that? I can't see.
It's me.
All right,
Joe.
please go ahead.
Yep, sorry. Matt, I'm following your footsteps. Between the 111 and the 112 support, did you all run into any issues that kind of jumped out?
Nothing significant, nothing that wasn't covered in the migration document, which as usual was pretty good. Well, the one thing we really tripped up on was in the upgrade test, we use CAP H, the Helm add-on provider, and it also made the transition from V1 beta 1 to V1 beta 2, and we didn't take that into account. So it was actually tripping us up in our own upgrade test. It really wasn't a CAP Z issue. Once we figured that out, we were able to move that version forward and get past it. So if you're not depending heavily on CAP H, as we call it, then you probably won't see this. But otherwise, it was pretty smooth. It definitely was not as much work as 111 was.
Awesome, thank you.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Alrighty then.
Okay. I don't know if you see my hand. Okay.
Yeah, I see your hand, but I can't see who it is. So please go ahead.
Oh, it's Dan. Yeah, Daniel. Matt, this is actually a question for you. When you say there was an issue with CAPH for the upgrade test, are you talking about what was there an issue okay, I can see how if you're using, I guess, an older CAPH that wouldn't be forward compatible, right, with V1 beta 2, but did you have to use two different versions? Did you have to upgrade it in the test itself? Or did you deploy the newest version of CAPH on the old cluster and then continue using it after the upgrade?
We had kind of fallen behind on upgrading CAPH itself, and so we're using a version from a long time ago and upgrading it to another version from a really long time ago. I think if we dug into it, I think the issue is the fix was to upgrade to a more recent version of CAPH and then the current version of CAPH. I think both of which are on V1 beta 2. So it probably suggests there was some issue there transitioning from V1 beta 1 to V1 beta 2, which is what we're doing in the upgrade test with CAP Z. And essentially we just routed around the damage by moving Cap H forward. So there may be some issue there with Cap H, but its own upgrade tests have been passing the whole time. And so we just kind of moved forward and washed our hands of it. So it's there may have been some issue with Cap H, but we're I'm probably not explaining this well, but we were on like 0.10. The current version of Cap H is 0.60. I'm about to do another patch release. And it's on V1 Beta 2 now. You should be able to move from a V1 Beta 1 version of Cap H to a V1 Beta 2 version of Cap H. Its own upgrade tests seem to prove that that's fine. But when we were doing it in conjunction with Cap C, also upgrading from a V1 Beta 1 to V1 Beta 2. I mean, we're not fully using V1 Beta 2 in Cap C yet, but we're obviously importing, changing the imports and all that stuff. There was a problem there, and we made the strategic decision of not to dig any deeper because it was pretty old. And if we run into people in the field having this issue, we'll help them out, is basically where we landed.
Okay. I think I'm a little bit confused about whether it's possible to use Cap H that has the V1 Beta 2 contract when the core controllers are like on, I guess, V1 Beta 1.
It should be possible. I think we've proved that in our main branch and all that. It was just there was some more subtle issue with upgrading from an old version that was definitely V1 Beta 1 to the V1 Beta 2 version in conjunction with doing the same with our provider. And so I'm probably glossing over some actual bug here, but that's where we landed. Does that make sense? Sorry, go ahead, Stefan.
No, we're good. I can maybe add a little bit from a core copy perspective. So I think in general, there is not really much of a contract between add-on providers and core copy. So there should be no real difference between a beta 1 or a beta 2 contract of an add-on provider, just from a contract point of view. I think problems that you can definitely have in general, but it does not sound like that's the one you had with Cap C, is that if you basically combine a core copy version that does not have a beta 2 with a provider that already depends on consuming core copy beta 2 resources, then you definitely hit problems. That's something that we hit in Cap VCI, for example, because we have, let's say, some supporting controllers in our end-to-end test, and we basically have to wait, bumping them to consume beta 2 APIs because we still need them in combination with old versions of copy in our test suites. And those old versions of copy simply don't have beta 2, so they would not work at all. Sorry. So
Yes.
Probably not really helpful, but maybe a bit of context.
I think that's explaining it better than I did. That's essentially the issue. The upgrade trust was trying to use a V1 Beta 2 based version of Cap H with an older version of Cap C that hadn't gotten there yet. We moved them both forward so they were on the same page. And I think we're fine now.
All right, cool. All righty. Any other questions or comments that folks have? Okay, then if there's no ad hoc topics or anything, we will close this meeting. Going once, going twice. All right, that's a wrap. Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you all next week. And yeah, have a good one.
Thanks, Mike.